Welcome everyone. Nick Ottinger here once again with a iRacing Pro Track Guide for Michigan International Speedway and an Xfinity Series with Team Conti Sim Performance. So this is a momentum-based track, obviously, and like our common theme, I'm gonna let this run for realistically about 5 laps here, and we're gonna roll through some dynamics of what turn 1 and 2 are compared to 3 and 4, and how we can navigate through this track efficiently. So, with that said, I'm gonna let this roll. Alright, so that's 5 laps. Let's say 5 quality laps here to open up our run. Not saving at all, just pushing to the limits. Now I'm gonna go back to our last lap here. Diagnose lap five's tendencies, the dynamics of turn 1 and 2 together, and obviously separately, and the same thing for 3 and 4. Now, just to preface the straightaway, or this obviously angled D-shaped that we have on the front stretch here, I would not advise running the left sides right on this line unless you're just in a racing scenario after the start finish line. Reason being is because the splitter makes a lot of contact through the bumps right in this section. You can see a small little curve here, and then it starts actually bending about the same style of angle as the actual paint down here. Okay, so this is the area where you will hit some bumps, and this is why I keep about a quarter of the car lower to half a car lower here, or sometimes I'll just run in this lane just on this straight here. And if I go down to this flat, when I'm racing some guys. I mean, you just take a risk slamming the splitter when you actually get down from the banking right here, transition all the way up to the track to even more banking. Okay. So with that said, just let's kind of focus towards how we're going to angle into turn one. A lot of drivers will have a shallow entry into one because they do not arc out and get to the peak of this wall at the right angle. They basically straighten it up, and then they're already starting to turn down at this point. Okay, and now, we have the start of the grandstands here, and we have a green light that you see, a caution light, and that is where I'm trying to actually get flush with the wall. Okay, just before here, as you see, I am pretty much the same angle as this wall. And now my objective is to turn away from it and decelerate while keeping some momentum. This track is all about minimizing speed loss, right? And whether that's off the throttle, minimizing speed loss while you're on the throttle, whether you're sliding the tires or anything like that. It's obviously what racing is, but this track is very important for that quality. And for turn one here, this momentum you're carrying into one is actually going to dictate a push condition or push loose condition in the center of 1 and 2. And what we're achieving here is you're going to have the rate at which you're coming off the throttle control the momentum that you're actually carrying into the corner, your minimum speed into this corner. So let's slow it down some. Once I get the left front crossing the seam, right? See, I'm actually angled away from the wall, turning away from it. I'm still trying to keep this car straight as much as possible before I start actually angling down to get to my actual preferred apex and my preferred line. So you have obviously 4 seams here, right? This is the lowest seam, closest to the yellow line, second seam, third seam, and fourth seam, okay? And in 1 and 2, our objective is to get the left front tire as close to this seam as possible, okay? Now, this is where it is a little bit tricky at this track, is it's finding where you want to get this left front on the seam or just right at it and right next to it. Because you don't want to have too shallow of an entry, because all you're going to do at this point is compromise your center speed. And we just talked about, you want to make sure you find your minimum speed at the correct angle and the correct speed. And you don't want to do it too early, because you don't want to have to return to the throttle too heavy to make lap time back up. Okay, so that's why it's very important to find a common, comfortable trait that works for you to decelerate off the throttle and to make sure you're actually turning the car. So let's keep it slow. I'm off throttle. I'm, rolling back off the throttle, and I want you to see where I'm doing it. I got the left front in this section here, keeping it straight, and then I'm starting to turn away once I get the right front crossing that seam. And before I get the left front crossing this third seam, very important quality again, making sure I am decelerating. You see I'm partial throttle here. Still partial throttle, carrying all the way through this section. Now all my objective is, while I'm carrying into my center of this corner, is finding my apex, okay? And finding that apex, I want to make sure I can sustain that apex once I start the momentum side of the lap again, meaning more throttle input and making more lap time, because I'm actually getting more linear throttle. And in other words, getting to 100% throttle. As you see here, I'm 50%. So when I get to linear throttle, it's just from 50 to 100%, making sure I'm going in, a linear, smooth technique. Now, you can see I don't have a lot of fluctuation, in this seam, on the second seam, from that third to second seam. And it's because I'm keeping that tendency in partial throttle consistent, keeping it smooth. And the same thing with the wheel input. When I'm crossing the seam, the car is going to have quite a bit of a balance change. So that is why I'm trying to keep the car neutral as a driver. That's my objective. So right where it crosses it, you can see I'm still partial throttle. I'm working just a little bit more throttle, and now I'm working through some bumps. I'm not on this seam right now, but I'm dead center 1 and 2 in the center of it, getting ready to actually start shaping for my exit of 2. Okay, and I'm still partial throttle. You can see it's not a perfect, angle, round angle. and you can see how much it breaks off and still kind of starts angling back towards the left. And the same thing with the seam, it follows suit. So this seam, we're finding our minimum speed rate. So we're 176. Obviously, we're well past center of the corner. We're about 65% through the corner now of turns 1 and 2. And now this is where our minimum speed is really going to be. And my objective is to keep the angle once I get to this seam as really consistent as I can. And by doing that, I'm angling that wider arc that you see that I carried to this point. I'm angling it to where I'm having as much capability in keeping the car balanced and to the edge as possible. Just so I can actually keep, and this is going to happen later on, just so I can keep that balance of where I'm using the throttle. That's going to help balance this car to be a little bit more free or tight if I need it. So as you can see here, I'm trying to wrap this seam as much as possible without putting the left front under it. And I'm 100% throttle. So as we know, 100% throttle, you have a lot of skew in this car. It's usually just the facts of what it is. You have a lot of skew once you get to that point. And especially for this track temp, you have a lot less rear grip. So the rear is going to step out in this circumstance. And you can see I'm still trying to wrap this seam as much as possible. So off of 2, the lower you can exit without compromising your exit speed, the better. And it's just because you're actually going to be able to straighten the wheel out and not have to scrub speed off once you're actually getting closer to the wall. Because once you get closer to the wall, the front's going to start having a little bit of slip to it, and then it's going to start gripping because the banking's actually falling away, and then you can actually get the car, the front and rear, kind of working together. So that's the nature of turn 2. It comes up pretty quick, so you don't want to open the wheel up too soon. So in this area, as you see here, I'm doing a little bit of counter steering past the Michigan 2 logo on the right here. I'm still below the second seam. I'm still angling way past it. Essentially, I'm angling to the same type of angle the yellow line is and this seam. And you can see how it starts having a sharper angle on the exit of it. So try not to exit and open the wheel up too soon at exit of 2, because that's where it bites a lot of people. Is they'll get to the throttle and get the car actually in a push condition, and then to obviously negate that push condition, they'll start opening the wheel up and thinking the car is actually gripping. But instead, what it's doing is you're putting yourself in a more compromising spot for the late exit here of hitting the wall and wrecking the car. So that's exit of 2. Our turns 3 and 4 is obviously completely different. We were running the bottom, right? Bottom of 3 and 4 is pretty ideal. And we're driving far into the corner, but we're completely off the gas in 3 and 4 to set the nose of the car. And seams are just as important to recognize on what you're balancing the car on entry of turn 3. Same objective. You're trying to find your minimum speed. You're trying to make sure you got the apex as crisp as you can, making sure the apex is not sliding the nose, sliding the rear. You're just trying to work on wrapping that yellow line here. Okay, so turning away from the wall at the red logos on the wall, still turning away from the wall at the Cup Series logos. Cross this seam obviously, and still crossing this third seam. And you can see now I'm starting my deceleration phase. But unlike turn 1, I'm angling my entry to this yellow line. I'm angling it early so I can actually get that left front painted, no pun intended, on the paint of this yellow line, because there's a lot of grip for it. So now this is where I would say you have a little bit of a compression point that can give drivers a false sense of security, really. Especially for the old legacy Michigan, you'd be running this lane and you'd be able to have to get into the throttle a little bit more aggressive, where here you got to wait just a little bit longer to make sure your left front's actually on this paint and gripping. So watch this straight of my lift point. You can see how I just completely dumped the throttle. And now I'm crossing the seam. Now I'm loading into this compression point. But very important, when I get the left front crossing the seam, I'm not sliding in the nose. I'm not opening the wheel back up. I'm not using too much wheel angle to turn to the left to slide it more, because I want to make sure when I get the right front crossing it, I'm actually stabilizing the steering and essentially just being smooth is what I'm referencing, and not having to do 10 to 20 degrees of movement, right? Want to make sure I'm keeping it as consistent as possible so I can get down to the angle I want here and hold my partial throttle stage, and then worry about getting my momentum built back up. So you can see angled down, getting the left front right on top of this paint. You can see I'm not full throttle. I'm wrapping this paint as much as I can to the Michigan USA logo that is red obviously on the wall, and trying to wrap it as much as possible. Still doing the same objective, trying to wrap it as long as possible. Now, if we pinch it too much, you're just going to sacrifice exit speed. That's why you don't want to pinch the exit too much. But I find this to be actually a good marker here to start kind of opening the wheel up to not break the car free from too much wheel angle to the left, and use a straight line approach essentially of just keeping the wheel straight once you get the right front and right rear crossing this seam, so you're not breaking it loose again, because that's going to be a common theme later into a run. It's going to be easier to break the car free because naturally the car is just going to be more edgy through this section about 15 to 25 laps into a run. So you can see this coming off turn 4. I get to this light as a reference, and you can see I'm bringing the car down here, right? But now I'm going back half the car up again, right through these bumps. So with that said, I'm gonna let's go to, I'd say 22, and we'll play it in chase view from lap 24 to 25. We'll do the first 2 laps in driver view so you can see the difference. And with that, after we do that, we'll close the video out. But I want to make sure you guys see the difference from lap 5 times and capability compared to, the last 5 of just working through maybe 60 to 70% of a fuel run. So a lot less throttle in this stage now, as you see. Still partial throttle using the seam. Seam as a good tool and keeping it on the apex. Turn 3 and 4, you're going to see the same trait of getting all the way off. Staying off, getting to the paint a little earlier. Minimum speed's definitely down compared to a new tires grip levels. So you have a rolling phase in turn 1 now, well into the run. Arced the corner out a little bit too much. Definitely was chasing the rear of the car. So the last lap here should be a pretty decent one. You can just see how edgy the rear of the car is just a little bit, even on benchmark that I'm running here. And it's just because of the track temp being pretty hot. There's not a lot of grip out here on this track. Trying to wrap this painted line as much as possible. See, I'm wrapping it longer. Exit a little bit lower. If you can do that, you're going to have a really good time this week if you can have that quality. That is a characteristic of this new Michigan that really pays off, is having the patience to wrap that painted line as much as possible, because people later on will just keep chasing the car up to the wall of turn 4 and just slide in the rear without knowing it, because they don't feel they're sliding it, but you're just sliding and being more prone at that grip level and skew angle, because ultimately they're trying to carry too much speed instead of driving the car straight off the corner. So they're just trying to muscle it off the corner. But that's going to be it for us this week here with the track guide from Michigan International Speedway and Xfinity Series. I do appreciate you guys always for trusting Team Conti Sim Performance. And if you guys have any questions, please reach out to any of us here at Team Conti Sim Performance, and we will be gladly accessible to help you. So good luck this week, and if you guys have any questions, please reach out.